Hey everybody, find the boys on Facebook by searching The Longbox, a month in comics, and follow them on Twitter at The Longbox MIC.
Hello and welcome to The Longbox, the road to Infinity War. I'm Doug Hawkins, and this is week 2, so we'll be talking about The Incredible Hulk, directed by Louis Leterrier. Okay, so yeah, second in the MCU. This is actually the first MCU movie I watched. As I said last week, I didn't get kind of swept up with Iron Man. I thought it was kind of a little bit scraping the barrel, and I kind of rolled my eyes at it. So it was only when this movie came out and I heard about the fact that these movies connected and kind of like got wind of what Marvel were trying. So was I interested? So I watched this one first and then went back and watched Iron Man. And I must say I thought this film was good at the time, basically because I thought this was as good as it was going to get for the MCU, and this kind of 3-star kind of unoffensive, not really shit comic book movie I thought it was all we were going to get. And the fact that this movie sets up a wider universe and explores things from other comic books that I was aware of got me quite excited. So I actually was very positive about this movie watching it firsthand. Interestingly enough, though, now in comparison to the rest of the MCU movies, it's a little bit flat, I must say. It is just not in keeping at all, as I will go into in this podcast. Yeah, so the first thing to mention is the way that the origin is done in this movie. It does it over kind of the beginning credits. It's just done in a kind of montage, no dialogue, over the top of the credits to basically show the origin of the Incredible Hulk, which many people already knew because there was the Ang Lee Hulk movie a few years before. So I think they didn't really want to retell that story. Is it particularly interesting anyway? That's up to you to decide. I was quite interested by the way that they did the origin here. I thought this was going to be revolutionary and revolutionise the way that comic book movies fought. I thought we were going to see this happen a lot more. I remember when Zack Snyder was talking about doing Man of Steel, he was saying that it wasn't going to be an origin movie, but it wasn't going to be a sequel either, and I thought this was the way it was going to be done. Unfortunately, I can't really think of any other comic book movie that's really done this. Which is a shame because it's just a good way. If you're not interested in telling the origin, just get it done in this way. I was quite impressed with it. Maybe it doesn't work for everything. I mean, I was expecting to see it with Spider-Man Homecoming, but we didn't get that as well. But yeah, I thought it was a nice way to kind of tell how Ed Norton's version of the Hulk came about without having to spend half the movie doing it. And what is interesting as well in that kind of credit sequence is you get some references to Tony Stark, because you get the Stark Industries and the military. You see that the military are buying Stark tech to track the Hulk. You also get some S.H.I.E.L.D. references, and you see Nick Fury's name on a few documents as well. So it really kind of, from the beginning of this film, sets up the idea that this is part of the MCU and has a wider universe. What is interesting as well about the kind of the way these credits are done is, I don't know if there's anything in this movie that contradicts the fact that this is a sequel to Ang Lee's Hulk. Obviously, I know it's not, because it's not the same way. The origin that they tell in the credits is not the same as the origin that is in Ang Lee's film. But I think you could stretch to believe the things that have happened to Ed Norton's Hulk happened to Eric Bana's Hulk, perhaps. The only reason I'm bringing this up is because the movie starts in Brazil. You see Edward Norton's Bruce Banner in Brazil, living in Brazil, hiding out there, and that is, I believe, how Ang Lee's Hulk ends. So it's kind of nice the way that, is it a sequel, isn't it? It's kind of a nice kind of, I don't know, it feels fluent. I feel like you can kind of regard what happened to Eric Bana's Hulk as kind of canon almost. I do find that the tone of this movie is a little bit at odds. It's unlike Iron Man. This is a kind of a somber tone to the movie. It's almost like they had two approaches, doing kind of the more kind of serious toned film and then kind of the light-hearted one with Iron Man. They're kind of made basically at the same time. And it was like, let's just throw them both out there and see which one sticks. And unfortunately it wasn't this one, because, you know, because of the tone, it feels like the odd one out in the MCU. But when I said the tone was at odds, what I mean is, although it is somber through most of it, there are a few scenes that aren't. They just completely feel like they're part of a different movie. So there's the Stan Lee scene where Stan Lee drinks the blood of Bruce Banner from a contaminated bottle. And although, you know, me explaining that sounds like that could be part of a somber film, it just, the way it was lit, the way it was directed, just felt it was part of like the Fantastic Four movie or something. It just felt very light and colourful and breezy, rather than, you know, he doesn't die or anything like that, or it just felt cartoony basically, or comic booky. And there's also another scene as well with Liv Tyler, Betty, with in a taxi. There's this comedic scene where she's in the back of the taxi near the end of the film, or kind of the second half of the movie, and she kind of gets out of the taxi and starts screaming at the taxi driver, and it's quite a comical scene. And Ed Norton has kind of a not a zinger, but kind of a PS line at the end of it, and it just doesn't fit within this movie at all. I don't know if they were told to try and make the tone a little bit lighter in places because of the success of Iron Man, but yeah, it just seems to be at odds, because, you know, this film is just not as fun as Iron Man at all. Ed Norton was actually the co-writer of this movie, or did a rewrite on the script. I shouldn't actually give him credit, that probably aren't his, but he did a rewrite on the script, and that was something that interested me in this movie way back when I heard about it. It almost kind of gave gravitas to the film, or kind of it made it it legitimized it basically, to hear that, you know, Ed Norton was starring in this comic book movie, and, you know, he's not just turning up as well, he's committed enough to do a pass at the script. I think he tapped out of any future projects because the movie was edited without his say-so. Well, maybe not without his say-so, because I don't know how much authority he had, but I think he found it was edited behind his back. I don't know. But yeah, he wasn't impressed with the final product, and felt that he couldn't work with these guys, work with Marvel moving forward, as if this was the way that they were going to kind of treat his writing or something. I don't know. I suppose it all worked for the best, because the recast of Banner later on is better. I think this is evident in the movie as well about the edit, because I feel that the Brazil stuff is just far too pacey. It feels like a lot more was going on there originally, and you know, maybe it was a bigger part of the movie. And I think there's one key moment that kind of highlights this. It's a moment where we meet a female co-worker in the factory, who he has interactions with because he stops some kind of bullies hitting on her. And then later on, we see him sneak into her apartment, and kind of when the government asked after her, and it plays as if they've had more interaction than what we've seen in the movie. It does still make sense within the movie, but it's not shot in a way that is like, oh yeah, remember this character from before. It's shot in a way of like, you already know this character better than we actually do, and it just screams to me as if there was a lot in there that's kind of cut out. And I believe there's stuff in deleted scenes where he's actually going to get the flower that he's dealing with. In this, he's just sent it, or I think he goes hiking for it in deleted scenes, I think someone told me once. So yeah, I think there is a lot of a lot missing from that Brazil stuff, which is a shame, because actually is the better stuff. I know it's the stuff where he's not turning into the Hulk and not progressing the story, and not being, it doesn't feel like a Hulk story because the military aren't after him and he's not with Betty and blah blah blah. But I just think like that is the more interesting stuff, him hiding out in Brazil. One interesting thing that this movie does, and I'm being careful to use the word interesting, is it does the heart monitor. So he has a pulse reader that like shows his heart rate go up, and it's kind of when it gets to a certain level, that is when he hulks out. So he's got to kind of keep that down. The problem is that it kind of is against what the Hulk is, because, you know, the Hulk is about he gets angry and then he turns into the Hulk, where I understand that's part and parcel. Like when you get angry, your heart rate rises, and that would then turn him into the Hulk. But this is kind of saying that anything that raises his pulse would turn him into the Hulk. So him going for a run, or being worried, or anxiety, or or even having sex, as it points out later on in the movie, will turn him into the Hulk. So it kind of dilutes the concept of the Hulk. I don't think the film intentionally does that, or like highlights the fact that they've changed that. But looking at it, that is absolute, because it just doesn't have the metaphor that I think the Hulk originally had, which is, you know, about kind of rage and keeping your anger in check. This seems to be about something else if it's just about his heart rate. So yeah, I wasn't the biggest fan of that. I understand that it's a great visual reference for the audience, you know, to see a number, you know, hitting 88 miles an hour and you go back in time type thing. But yeah, I think it just dilutes the core concept, unfortunately. I mentioned last week about shooting action scenes in the dark seemed to be a trope of the Marvel movies early on, and you know, or early on in the franchise, and I didn't really embellish on that. I just kind of left it there. But now I'm going to go back to that, because this film has a few scenes like that where they've shot. There's the scene where we first see the Hulk with Tim Roth when they're being hunted in Brazil, and it's all shot in the dark. And so is the final battle as well against Abomination, as was the Ironmonger scene in Iron Man 2. In Iron Man. Again, as I mentioned last week, this is just a way of kind of hiding less than perfect CGI. I think the Hulk looks quite bad in this film, and would look worse if more of it was shot in the light. There is an action scene in the middle of this film that is, and kind of, you know, it's up to you how tolerant you are of the look of it. But the stuff in the dark, especially the first scene, they kind of shoot it like a horror movie, so you only see parts of him. You know, you can't really see if he's grey or blue or green, which, you know, plays with the mythos of the Hulk. But yeah, it was something that they did early on in these movies, and my belief is to kind of hide kind of less than stunning special effects. I think this movie, when it came out, was quite important at the time for me, or for MCU fans, because it did set up a shared universe really, really well, which I thought was fucking cool. But it doesn't do anything for the wider universe now. It kind of only just kind of set up Ross. There's nothing really in this movie that carries on deep into the MCU. It's really interesting looking at the two films, Iron Man and The Incredible Hulk, and seeing where the shared universe was. So this movie kind of sets up, you know, the idea of the super soldier serum. So it kind of sets up Captain America. You have references to Shield and Tony Stark and Stark Industries. But yeah, by the end of this movie, you kind of get a sense that the MCU is all about kind of military, you know, military applications. It just feels like, yeah, just about, you know, applying this superhero universe to the way that military would do it. I felt like that was the in, was like, what would it be like if, you know, Stark tech was used for the military, or as we see in Iron Man 1, against the military, I suppose, and or juxtaposed to it. And like the fact that, you know, the Hulk is a military experiment, and the fact that Abomination was kind of the super soldier serum, you know, turn bad, and then, you know, Captain America is a military is, you know, for the army, you know, to fight World War II. So yeah, it just from two movies in, it did seem like that was like the common theme for the MCU, which is weird, because looking back at it now, that's definitely not what it is. Moving on, I do think that Tim Roth is pretty good in this movie. It's part of the pattern that I was mentioning last week about weak villains, so cast well. And I think this film's quite interesting when it has the man versus beast element. So when it's Tim Roth's character with the Mark 1 super serum, where he's basically as Captain America fighting him on campus, that for me is far more interesting than the Hulk versus Hulk battle that we get at the end. I mentioned before that the first appearance of the Hulk in this movie is shot like a monster movie. I think that's also kind of bleeds through the rest of the movie as well. There's the scene where Tim Roth's character is getting injected with the super serum, and he's on this gurney that flips, and the whole time it's just lit like a Frankenstein movie. It's a shame that they didn't lean on that a little bit more and kind of like go 100% with that style, and like, you know, make a Jekyll and Hyde style movie, but, you know, with the Hulk. But yeah, we know that Marvel isn't really into stylizing their movies so much. They kind of like it uniform, as we'll go into when we go through the other movies. But yeah, it's just a shame because that's when the movies were at. That's where this movie is most interesting, I think, when it is making decisions like that. Well, I find the character of Mr. Blue a wasted opportunity. The Samuel Stearns character. The when we first meet him, he's Mr. Blue and he's talking to Banner, over the interweb. He's his confidant and his helper on trying to find a cure. When we first meet him, he's wearing blue, and it's just one of those slap your head, real obvious things. Anyway, that character it doesn't track well for me anyway. There's no tension with the Mr. Blue thing anyway, because you know that there's no way as an audience member you think that he's cured the Hulk. Like, it's just, we're just going through the motions. Like, at no point is there a genuine, like, belief of, like, oh, this is over. And you kind of, I suppose this is the same with Banner as well. Like, his through line for this entire movie is to cure the Hulk, where as an audience member you don't want him to succeed at that, because we like seeing the Hulk and he's our hero. Although he is a monster, he's the character we root for, so we don't want Banner to cure that, and that's the same with Mr. Blue as well. We don't care about what he's doing and we don't want him to succeed, and even when we think he has given him the cure, we know damn well that it's not going to work. So it just feels like you're going through the motions, and I kind of switched off anytime these type of scenes were going on. I kind of feel as well that Roth and Tim Roth's character and Mr. Blue are just mental. By the end of it, especially the Tim Roth character, you don't believe him in or his motives. Like, I understand, like, I wish I was a better soldier, but when it comes to turning himself into Abomination, and the same with Mr. Blue, there's no reason why the pair of those characters would be willing to be involved in that transformation. It just, I don't know, are we supposed to buy the first dose of serum made him mental? Or because there isn't, I don't know, I think this film's supposed to have kind of a Captain Ahab feel with Moby Dick, the whole, Ross trying to track down his white whale, that is the Hulk. But then that mantle gets taken by Tim Roth because he's the one that gets the obsession. But you never get the feeling that he is actually obsessed with this mission. I don't know. I just feel like, as I was saying before, kind of weak villain, and it's just not very well explored. So when we get to the point where he's like, yeah, transform me, you're not really 100% on board why. And then I just hate the design of Abomination. I'm really one of those people that don't like to complain about the way that movies decide to adapt visuals or kind of costumes or anything like that, because I'm sure they try everything. I'm sure that there's 100 different drawings, and yes, they've made a leather cape for Batman to see if it works, and seen how it looks on camera. So I don't really like bitching about things not being comic book accurate, because I imagine what they come up with is I imagine they start off with exactly what it looks like in the comic and then try and make it look more cinematic. But in this case, it just doesn't look like an Abomination at all, and it would go a long way. And the same with the Doomsday from Batman vs Superman, where you could just put the fucking spikes through his face and he would look more like Doomsday. With this, it's just give him those ears, give him those spiky ears, and I think it would look so much more like the character. A few more things I want to pick up on, a couple of scenes near the end as well. I've always hated that shot of Bruce jumping out of the helicopter, where he's not, so to give you some context, he's not too sure if he's been cured from the Hulk problem. He's just been injected with something that made him kind of shrink back to Banner. Abomination is smashing up the city, and he decides that he needs to help, so he jumps, leap of faith out of the helicopter. Now he hits the tarmac and leaves a hole, which is a Banner, not a Banner shaped hole, but a Banner size hole, because the hole that he hits it gets punched through by Hulk, and it's Hulk's fist is bigger than the hole that's made in there. So that means that Bruce hit the tarmac as Bruce, but somehow smashed his way through and ended up under the tarmac. That makes no sense. Like, I understand that he can't die, but still his body would, his body wouldn't push him through the tarmac, because he's still Banner. He's still the size of Banner. Now, if he fell as Hulk and hit the tarmac, of course, because of the weight, he would smash through the tarmac. But he's not. It's quite clearly he hit it as Bruce, because the Hulk's too small for it to be the Hulk. So yeah, really really dumb scene. It is cool to watch like Hulk smash out of the hole, but just makes no sense to me. I must say that Ed Norton and Liv Tyler's kind of chemistry in this movie is the anti-Downey Jr. and Paltrow. I'm not saying that Norton's bad in this, but he kind of, I don't know, underplays it or understates the character, plays it a little bit low key, and maybe that's part of kind of staying calm and getting a handle on this emotion. But everything seems to be played monotone, and therefore so's Tyler. Like they just don't seem to have the chemistry, or they just don't bounce off each other, which is a shame because the previous movie of Downey Jr. and Paltrow is the best thing about the movie, or one of the reasons the movie succeeds. We get a smashy final battle, which I hate. It's in the dark. It's CGI character fighting CGI character, and just whatever. It's just one of those things where you're just like, okay, wrap it up so we can get to the end of the movie. I'm watching as well. I can't remember if there's any real reason that Hulk succeeds in beating Abomination, because that's the thing. It's not like in these sort of situations there's something that the character has that's better than the villain. So last week, Tony Stark is smarter than Obadiah, and has Pepper on his side to help out, so he has the edge, and that's why he wins the final battle. In this, there's no reason for the Hulk to be better than Abomination. In fact, it should be worse, because Abomination, Tim Roth's character is a trained Marine. He's had several serums. The only thing that kind of plays out is he's distracted at trying to kill Ross, I suppose. So maybe that's the edge that the Hulk has. But you just like I said before, you just want it to be over as soon as it kind of starts. Yeah, and with Abomination still being alive and Mr. Blue being alive, turning into the leader, there's a scene where after Abomination gets off the table of Stern's table, like some of the serum drips into a cut in his head, and it starts to expand, and he becomes the leader, which is quite a big Marvel comic book character. I'm surprised that these characters have not been used in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or something. I understand that the franchise doesn't want to go forward with them. There's no really use for them in the movies, but I just feel like, especially in certain seasons of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. where they're scratching around and they really want to be tied into the MCU, these are two characters that you can use in some way. I mean, obviously you're not going to get Tim Roth back, and it's hard to do all that CGI. But I just think there is something that you can do with those two loose ends, which they could tell a great story with. And then there's the after credit scene, which I find really interesting because first of all, it isn't an after credit scene. It plays directly before the credits, but obviously feels like not part of the movie because the movie ends and then you have this extra scene, and it's Ross drinking. And Tony Stark comes in there and, mentions that he's putting a team together. And, it's like, oh yeah, fucking A, cool. This is smart. This is where we're going. It looks like Tony Stark is now building the Avengers because, under Nick Fury's guidance because of the last after credit scene. And now he needs Ross's help, and they're probably going to, I don't know, fight the Hulk or something, or he wants Ross's help to recruit Bruce, and it feels like, oh yeah, this is cool. This is where this is going, but it's not, as we know later on. They kind of change their mind on what that scene sets up. There is a short which kind of null and voids or explains away why this scene happens when it actually has nothing to do with the Avengers. But I'll get to that when we cover Thor, because it's on the Thor DVD, and I think it'd be nice to do the one shots with the DVD that it was released with. But it's just an interesting scene because they obviously thought they were going in a certain direction with this. As I said before, it felt very military driven and kind of that kind of, I don't want to say narrow-minded, but that singular vision. And at some point they changed it, that's not what the Avengers was going to be or where this franchise was heading, and kind of turned the boat a bit. And I think it's going to be interesting in the next coming weeks to see exactly when those decisions were made and why, to be honest. So yeah, that'd be quite interesting to see where they went from what that scene seems to be setting up to what the Avengers actually came in the next few movies, and to see that change. Okay, so on to my ranking system. As I explained last week, the way I was going to rate these films was not going to be, thumbs up or thumbs down or 5 star. It was just going to be in relation to the other movies that I've seen on the road to Infinity War. So that's an easy one this week because there's, just Iron Man from last week and now Hulk. And I think I can quite safely say that the order it will go in is Iron Man first and then the Incredible Hulk. I don't think anyone can argue with that, or I've never heard anyone say any comments that disagreed with that. But if you do disagree with that order, please message me, and I would like to hear your reasons why. But I think that's quite a conclusive one this week. It's probably going to be the easiest week to do. Okay, so next week is Iron Man 2, Jon Favreau's Iron Man 2. So I'll see you next week. I've been Doug. Read more comics.